What's up, everybody? I'm Jason, and welcome back to another episode of A Points in Focus, the official podcast of pointsinfocus.com and the Points in Focus YouTube channel. I'm Jason, and like I said, welcome back to another episode. If you're new to these are where this is my corner of the internet, or YouTube, you could say, where I talk about something that I find interesting or have run into in the whole camera photography, cinematography, filmmaking industry, or alternatively, I will expand upon what I talked about in previous week's videos. So a lot more behind the scenes details and a lot more of what's going on or what was going on, or in this case, what a thought that whole video had triggered. So last Tuesday, I posted, and this was an out-of-the-blue video for me. It was not on my schedule or anything that I predicted doing it originally. I posted a video talking about taking Canon's TC-80N3 timer release, mine specifically, that the dial for the settings controls had basically stopped working. It stopped being functionally usable. And I instead, through disassembly and cleaning or deoxidizing the contacts, I guess I should say, I surmised that the problem was the oxidation on the contacts and the rotary encoder, and therefore if I could deoxidize and clean them, then I would be able to restore functionality. Long story short, if you want to see how I did that, how to take it apart, how to clean it with Deoxit, check out the video. It's linked in all the usual places. But in the process of making that video, I came to the realization that it's entirely possible that I could break the thing. It would not be repairable, that I couldn't get it fixed. Fortunately, that wasn't the case, but in that event, what would I do? Would I get a new one? Where would I get it? How much would it cost? Etc. All of that kind of stuff. And so I started going on and I started looking around. The OEM Canon TC-80N3s were always fairly expensive. They were, I think, far more expensive than they really should be, but I guess on one hand, it is a niche product, so I can understand the cost situation. On the other hand, compared to all of the other timer releases that are out there, Canon's official N3 connector is by far the best of the N3 connectors. It locks when you put it in, and then it has a little collar that when you pull it back, or when you go to pull it out, the collar releases the lock and allows you to pull it out very easily, compared to, like all of the third-party ones, which are very much a case of they don't release the lock, or they don't have that kind of ease of use or access, or however you want to put it. So you are paying more. It is a niche product. I understand that. It does have a better connector on it that I prefer over, I've used plenty of third-party N3 cables for remote triggers and stuff like that, and the Canon one I do prefer. So anyway, I went to look at what the pricing for that connector was, and I went on Canon USA's site, and Canon wanted $210 or something ridiculous. It was more than $200 for that connector, for the TC-80N3, which I thought they were ridiculously expensive when they were like at $80. 200 plus is insane, in my opinion. I certainly would not have been buying one of those from Canon USA. Of course, I couldn't because they were out of stock, so that didn't help the situation. Anyway, they're stupid expensive and they aren't there. I went and looked at B&H. B&H wanted like 150 or something like that, and they listed them as, of course, out of stock, but also discontinued. Now, Canon USA wasn't saying discontinued, and I don't know how B&H figures out or determines when things are discontinued. Presumably, they're told it's discontinued by the manufacturer, so Canon USA would have told B&H that the TC-80N3s are no longer in production or whatever. But then Canon USA doesn't list them as discontinued. They haven't listed, or they haven't removed them from the site. They are simply just listed as out of stock. So I don't know if they're actually discontinued or not, or if they're just out of stock and back ordered and whatever. This is, again, one of those things. It's a niche product. I'm sure that there's not a standard production line. I'm sure they sell very few in a year, and it's entirely possible that Canon Japan orders 10,000 or something at some point in time, and that's the production run, and that's what lasts for 5 or 6 years, or whatever. But what got me thinking about what I'm talking about today, is the fact that it was listed as discontinued. Now, if you're familiar with Canon's professional cameras, the proprietary N3 connector that their remote releases and the timer release use goes back to like the mid-90s. It is not a new connection, and it's been on film SLRs, DSLRs. It's now on the middle and higher end mirrorless cameras. So it's been around for a long time, and electrically, it is incredibly simple. It is 3 wires, a ground wire and 2 signal wires. And the signal wires are essentially directly wired into the shutter half press and the shutter full press button functions. So if you close short the half press to the ground, then that's literally the same as half pressing the shutter release. And if you short the full press to the ground, that's literally the same as full pressing or fully pressing the shutter release. There's no complexity involved in this at all. There's no, electrical protocol or logic signaling or anything like that. It's literally pull a contact low and that's it. It's done. It does what it's supposed to do. And because this is incredibly simple, it has made it very accessible for, and I know this is a whole niche thing, but it's made it very accessible for hobbyists, people with a modicum of electronics experience, and of course, like trigger manufacturers for flashes or remote camera triggers, to be able to easily implement half pressing and full pressing, which full pressing is taking a picture or starting a movie, functionality. It's for if you're using a microcontroller, the proper way to do this is you use an opto isolator to connect those 2 terminals, and then you just send a high out or a voltage out from one of the pins on your microcontroller through to the LED part of the opto isolator. That causes the photo sensor, the controlled side of the opto isolator, to trigger, and it shorts out the connection, and the camera takes a picture or autofocuses or whatever button function you actually triggered. Now, I, of course, can't say that Canon is discontinuing. I don't know. Again, I'm going off of what B&H says, but they don't also have, if it is being discontinued, I also don't see a replacement in Canon's website that they are showing that they are making available or that they're doing something. And of course, you could argue, well, the replacement is the timer and intervalometer functions that are built into Canon's newest cameras. The R5s, R6s, well, any of the R series, they have a bulb timer and they have an intervalometer function. And you could make the argument that, well, you don't need the external control anymore because the camera has the internal bulb timer that it can, or an intervalometer that it can use. And that would be a reasonable argument to an extent if the internal functionality was as good as or better than what you can do on the external timer. But it's not. If you set long intervals on the internal timer, it doesn't quite have the ability to let the camera go to sleep as far or as much as the external timer can. And so, if you're taking a picture every 5 minutes, the external timer, your camera goes completely to sleep. It half presses the shutter a couple of seconds before the exposures being made, which is time to which is early enough that it'll wake the camera up and bring it back online, and then it'll make the exposure, and that works really well. You can also combine long exposures with the interval timer, which is something I don't believe, at least the last time I looked at the internal software timers, you couldn't really do in the camera. But again, for me, the big one is, as a hobbyist, it's a super easy interface to be able to remotely control the camera with a microcontroller in some kind of bigger environment. And this has been, I think, one of my biggest frustrations in certain places. For example, and of course, again, I know I am super niche. I usually shoot with multiple cameras. I leverage this functionality because I trigger those cameras with Pocket Wizards, or, well, right now it's Pocket Wizards. Ultimately, I'd like to be triggering them with a custom Arduino Arduino ESP32 or Raspberry Pi Pico microcontroller setup that can also do time code and some other stuff. But the point there, or what the point is that this is a really simple interface for hobbyist to build a control for, to be able to trigger their camera on. And if you take something, for example, like my Zoom F6 audio recorder, which has nothing like that. It does not have a simple trigger interface. There's no plug into this, connect two terminals, two wires together, and it starts recording. You, of course, can hit the record button on the front of it. You can plug the Bluetooth module in, and you can use their app to control it over Bluetooth. And of course, presumably, since it's Bluetooth, you can sniff it, just reverse engineer it, and figure out what the protocol is and how to talk to it and control it. And you could say the same thing about Canon cameras. Like, they have Bluetooth wireless triggers that, it's part of the operating system now. And in fact, in the R5 Mark II, they've removed the infrared trigger that they used to have. So the R5, the R5C, I don't remember exactly which camera it was removed in, but had a wireless, it was just a simple infrared trigger that you could use to trigger the camera. The R5 Mark II, at least, I think the R1 is in the same category, and there may be other cameras, but I haven't looked at all of them, no longer support this simple infrared trigger. Everything's now Bluetooth. A lot of other brands have, or some other brands, I should say, have implemented or re-implemented their control, their wired control, using the USB port. So presumably, if they have done it right, it is a USB device, and it talks to the camera over USB and says autofocus or shutter press or whatever. And it's not that they're doing some really bizarre thing controlling the USB port, or shorting pins on the USB port and detecting that is separate from USB. But all of those things, Bluetooth and USB and anything else that I can't think of off the top of my hand, but those are the two big ones, are also very difficult for a hobbyist electronics engineer, hobbyist electronics person to implement in controlling their camera. Now, obviously, if you're LPA Designs, the people who make Pocket Wizard or Godox, or actually even a lot of the higher end hobbyists that are, I say hobbyists, but the people who are professional electrical engineers or electronics engineers that are hobbyist camera people that would be building stuff, they're not going to have a problem implementing a more complicated protocol. But if you aren't already kind of up to speed on making USB devices, and you don't have the equipment, the logic analyzers and everything to be able to reverse engineer what's happening or what's going on over USB or especially Bluetooth, then that becomes a pretty significant hurdle for somebody who's playing around and tinkering. And yeah, again, I keep saying this. I know this is a niche use case, but it is a use case that at least I consider important. I'm not going to say everybody else should consider important, but it is a use case that at least I consider important. And I don't know what a good solution or answer to all of this is. So, I mean, Bluetooth is somewhat challenging, but for example, Canon's wireless or Canon's Bluetooth protocol has been reverse engineered, and there is a library available for, I think it's Arduino or ESP32, or it'll probably work with all of them, that allows you to build your own custom Bluetooth control for your camera. I've looked into it. I haven't played around with it a lot or at all yet, but Bluetooth also has, and it's Bluetooth low energy, so you can potentially have the controllers subscribed or controlling multiple cameras simultaneously. That's all a thing that I really would like to spend some more time understanding and learning, is working with Bluetooth low energy with like Arduinos or ESP32s, and being able to sync and control and do stuff like that. And it's one of those things that I just have not had time to sit down and do in the detail and depth that I really want to try to understand that, because there are some things I want to build. I really do want to build a Bluetooth camera control, time code sync, think tentacle sync-y kind of system, but not quite. What I want to add on top of that is camera control, so that I can take a slate, and then when I open the slate, that'll turn on the recording for all the cameras and my audio recorder, or my computer probably more likely, and then I can use that to trigger the stuff. Because again, I work solo. I don't have a camera operator, an audio guy, a production team, and the less overhead that I have in terms of, doing all of that kind of triggering and walking around and starting cameras, generally the better. If I don't have to walk up to my camera, there's far less of a chance that my autofocus is going to be messed up when I come back to where my mark is, and then I have to deal with the messed up autofocus. But Bluetooth is sort of tenable, but then Bluetooth doesn't work everywhere. On the R5C, when you're in video mode, the N3 port works. You can trigger recording videos with the N3 port because it's just half and full pressing the shutter release. But because of the power limitations the camera, or that Canon has imposed, set, however you want to phrase it, on the camera, the built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip is disabled, and therefore Bluetooth control over the camera is not available. If you want remote control over the camera, you have to put the $1,000 Wi-Fi grip on, and that's Wi-Fi, I believe, only. I don't even think that supports Bluetooth. So you still don't have Bluetooth, you just have like Wi-Fi control, which again is, to me, not necessarily ideal. The cinema cameras, they also don't support Bluetooth, if I remember correctly. I don't think any of them do. They don't use the N3 port. They use a different protocol, which is somewhat more complicated than... it's considerably more complicated than the simple shorting of wires in the N3 connector, but it's not quite as complicated as Bluetooth or USB are to implement. And then going down the road of USB, I don't know how much I like that unless we're going to get some guarantees that the camera is going to start supporting USB hubs, because right now, all of my cameras, at least for video applications, almost always have a USB plug providing power. And there are, I'm sure people, if you've ever looked, there are like simple power splitters for like your phone, where you can plug your phone into your car and then plug a power cable into that. And it's kind of like a Y cable, but it goes, you know, single end to your phone and then splits for the other two. And I tried one sometime last year to see if I could plug, I don't remember what I was trying to do, but to see if I could have both remote control, I think it was from a DJI RS3 Pro, and power from a little Bluetooth or little USB power delivery battery pack. And I couldn't get it to work. I had an email discussion with one of my viewers recently, a couple months ago. He was having the same problem trying to power the camera, but he also had a, I think it was a small rig start-stop remote power, or remote handle, and the handle couldn't power the camera, but it used USB to control the camera, and he needed the external power, so he was looking, and he was using USB power delivery, but he was looking for a appropriate dummy battery that would fully power the R5C, which, as far as I know, the only one that'll do that is the one Canon sells, and because it reports to the camera that it's the right kind of battery. All of the third-party LPE6 style dummy batteries that I know of, at least, are they claim to be, they tell the camera they're LPE6Ns or NHs or just LPE6s. And of course, with the R5C, all of those batteries will cause the camera to disable the higher power or the full power operation. So the 8K 60 RAW with autofocus and all of that stuff. So you kind of have to have the right battery, a dummy battery, for that application. And I know for sure the Canon dummy battery will do that, but I don't know of any third-party ones. But he ended up having to switch over, if I recall, to that. Before he did that, he was trying the USB splitter cables, and he found one that worked sometimes. And what he told me in the discussion was, you know, when he first tried it, it worked, but it didn't work reliably. He would lose USB power delivery occasionally, or over the course, you know, after so many minutes or whatnot. And, you know, again, if that kind of operation, you know, if you're going to go, if Canon wants to go down the route of USB for control, again, small rig implemented USB for control because the camera already supports USB for control. It's the same protocol that it uses when you're plugged into your computer when you do remote shooting, because that's all USB control. It's part of the camera, the EOS API or whatever that Canon has. But if they want to go down, if you want to go down that route, then, you know, that puts us potentially as users in the situation where we only have one USB-C port on the camera. We can plug our controller into it and have control, or we can plug power into it and have power, or, you know, that's kind of like, you have to make a choice. And is Canon going to, you know, or Sony or Nikon or really anybody, are they going to put more USB-C ports on the camera? Probably not. Like, I don't see that happening. Are they going to, you know, but on the same token, if they support a hub, and look at, I'm all for open. I like things when I can just buy a USB hub from any, a USB power delivery capable hub from anybody that makes USB hubs, because hey, USB is a industry standard, computer industry wide data, electronic, or communication and power delivery protocol. And there's really no reason that you should have to buy, or you should buy, or be forced into buying a specific hub, or a specific charger, or a specific power supply, or battery bank, or whatever for your camera. It's implementing USB. It should be implementing USB to the extent of the standard. Now, I'm not saying that, like, I mean, it would be cool that your camera should necessarily implement the USB audio class driver. That, if you're not familiar with it, USB audio class is why you can plug a USB microphone into your camera and or computer and not have to install drivers. They all adhere at this point, for the most part, as far as I know. At least I'm not aware of anything that doesn't. They all adhere to a standard implementation, the USB audio class. This applies to both speakers and microphones and headsets and whatever. And Windows, Mac OS, Linux, the computers, Android OS already have the driver written, installed for a device that says it's a USB audio class device. And same thing goes for mass storage. Same thing goes for the picture transfer protocol that Canon uses on their cameras, which that's a whole nother thing. It would be nice if Canon would abandon that and go to just use USB mass storage. It would be far nicer for the end user, but on the same token, I also understand why they keep using the picture transfer protocol, because it's the thing that's already implemented, and rewriting or writing new software always costs more than just reusing the software you already have written. So, I kind of can understand, to a certain extent, that thought process, because, well, hey, I do the same thing. If I already have something written, I will just copy and paste it, or, use that library instead of writing a whole new library over, if that's, not that critical or high on the priority lists. But anyway, if they're not gonna, I could understand not implementing all of that on my camera. Now, I think it would be awesome if they would implement the USB audio class, or the camera industry as a whole would get together and create a new low latency USB audio interface, because it would be phenomenally cool to be able to plug a audio recorder or an audio interface or something like that into the USB port on the camera and have 24-bit 8-channel or 32-bit 8-channel or whatever that device supported audio going right into the camera in, as low of latency as possible, which might not be completely possible with USB, because there is latency in the protocol and way it interoperates. But, that would be really cool. But I could understand not having something like that implemented. But on the same token, if we're going to push more things to remote controls to USB, it would be really nice, it's almost to the point of being critical in my opinion, that the cameras implement the ability to operate through a USB hub, so that they can get power delivery and talk to the remote control. And potentially this could open up other doors for the camera controlling things that are on USB. I've always thought, ever since I got my R5C, I thought, what would be cool is the cinema cameras, the C400, C500, C300, etc. Every one of those that has dual pixel AF can focus or get autofocus information or focus information with manual cinema lenses. You can turn the focus guide on and the camera will tell you how out of focus you are and which direction you're out of focus, and then as you manually focus the lens, it'll do the whole thing to bring the focus in line. Because the sensor can measure the focus error just in general. It can measure how out of focus the phase information is at the in the sensor. And I thought, again, I'm a solo shooter. Most of the time that I'm shooting, I'm sitting here in front of the camera. I'm not behind the camera. And so I rely on autofocus. I rely on autofocus to be able to, keep things in focus. And allow me to shoot with like a fast aperture and still have a little bit of movement. I don't want to go completely out of focus if my chair slides 3 inches or something like that. And I always thought when I, first started getting into this, how cool would it be that like almost every cinema lens on the market has the Mod 8 or Mod 0.8 gear for the industry standard follow focus and focus servo pull motor setup. How cool would it be to be able to plug, and I don't, again, care if this is a Canon, like they make it and they're the only people who make it, but to plug a servo focusing motor into the USB port on my camera, or as this discussion is going, a hub plugged into my camera that has all the other things that I'm using plugged into it, or power at least, and have the camera autofocus that lens. Now, I know the hardcore cinema people go, no, we don't want that stuff, that's stupid or whatever, because, I get it. When your actor is costing you $1,000 a minute when they're in front of the camera, you don't want to leave, you have somebody pulling focus because they know what's happening and what's going on, and you don't want to leave that to chance. On the same token, when you get down into the lower budget doc and film stuff, being able to have the lens focus, and of course, I'm not going to suggest that cinema lenses should be built with focus motors in them because they're already expensive enough as it is. I don't really want them to be even more expensive. But on the same token, building a little focus servo that you can put on the lens, that the camera can focus the lens, rack the focus through the entire range to determine what the focus range is on the lens, and then draw, so it doesn't essentially try to focus past infinity or past the minimum focus distance. And then it could drive the focus on the lens, and since it's an external part, if you don't need it, don't buy it. If you don't want it, don't buy it. If you are like me and think it would be great to have for when you want to use a anamorphic cinema lens on on a project, but you also know that you're not going to be able to focus that lens or whatever manually all the time, you buy the little adapter, you put it on a rod, and you focus the lens automatically when necessary. Presuming, of course, having not played with anamorphic lenses yet, it's a presuming, of course, that the camera can actually deal with the focus in the information and everything coming from the lens, but that's a completely separate problem, so to speak. But, and I think this is kind of running towards the inevitable end of this discussion, but to do that, you need a USB hub, or the camera to be able to work through a USB hub, because it's not really a good idea, I think, or useful to force a decision. Oh, you can either power your camera, or you can drive this focus motor, or you can, remotely control the camera, but you can't do 2 or 3 of those things simultaneously, even though, in theory, USB is more than capable of being able to do all of those things simultaneously. So, yeah, that was the inevitable run of what's the situation? Like, is the N3 port actually going to go away sometime soon? If Canon really has discontinued the TC-80N3, potentially that means the RS, just the remote switch, the shutter release version without the timer, is already been discontinued or isn't long for this world either. And then if they're not making either of those, can we expect to see the N3 port be removed from the next R5 or the R1 Mark II or the R3 Mark II, or maybe is it 5 or 10 years and that port's gone and we're just left with USB or Bluetooth as our only connection mechanism? And if that is, what does that mean for like controlling the cameras or building things to control the cameras externally. So, yeah, I'm going to wrap that up here. I would love to hear your thoughts on this kind of non-standard camera control and USB as a thing in cameras, maybe support for hubs, whatever. If you've thought about this, or you've run into stuff with this or problems with this, leave a comment. Let me know. This is one of those places where, as I think technology is progressed and is enabling more sophisticated things to be done more easily by the standard level of engineer, it's progressing also in a way that makes it very difficult for the hobbyist to be able to keep up, or it raises the requirements for what the hobbyist needs to be able to or know how to do. Anyway, with that said, I'm going to wrap this one up here. I hope you had some food for thought out of this one. And again, if you did, leave a comment, do all the regular stuff, that kind of thing. So thanks for watching. That said, I hope you found this useful, or at least interesting. If you did, let me know by hitting that like button. If this kind of thing seems like it might be your kind of thing, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Finally, if you'd like to help and support this channel, you can help us for free by liking this video, sharing it with your friends on a social media platform of your choice, and leaving a comment with your experiences. Likewise, you can support us directly by hitting that thanks button or buying yourself something you've always wanted from one of the affiliate links in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.